Welcome to a deep dive into Deleuze's concept of time.
A concept that, as we'll see, resists easy definition and neat categorization.
Definitely. And for this deep dive, you've brought a stack of Deleuze's own writing.
As well as texts by scholars who have grappled with his work.
Quite the philosophical undertaking.
It is indeed.
We'll also touch on James Williams' book on Deleuze's time.
But our main focus will be dissecting these primary sources.
Right. We're going to delve into the intricacies of his thought, tracing his ideas from duration to the time image, and an ethics of becoming.
Deleuze's work on time is particularly interesting because it challenges so many of our assumptions about how time operates.
How we experience it and how it shapes our reality.
Yes, it's not a comfortable exploration.
But it is a necessary one for anyone seriously engaging with contemporary thought.
Absolutely.
We're not looking for easy answers or comforting platitudes here. We're going deep into the philosophical trenches.
Right into the thick of it.
So let's start by examining Deleuze's engagement with Bergson's concept of duration.
Which is a crucial foundation for his own understanding of time.
Absolutely.
Deleuze's debt to Bergson is significant, particularly when it comes to this concept of duration. Bergson argued that time as we experience it is not this series of discrete, measurable moments.
That we can neatly arrange on a timeline.
No, it's this continuous, indivisible flow.
This qualitative multiplicity that he calls duration.
Yes.
So it's not about ticking clocks and calendar dates.
Yeah.
It's about this lived experience of time, this sense of flow and continuity that can't be captured by measurement or quantification.
Exactly. And Deleuze picks up on this idea and runs with it. He argues that duration is the very ground of existence, the foundation upon which all of reality is built.
So Deleuze takes this idea of duration as a lived experience.
Yes.
And gives it this ontological weight, making it the foundation of his entire philosophical system.
That's right.
Fascinating. And it's from this concept of duration that Deleuze develops his distinction between two fundamental conceptions of time.
Kronos and Aion.
Okay, so let's break down these two conceptions, Kronos and Aion. Two different ways of understanding time.
Both operating within this broader framework of duration.
Right.
Think of Kronos as the time of the present, the time of the now, the time of action of cause and effect.
Of the material world unfolding around it.
Yes. It's linear, measurable, the time of clocks and calendars.
It's the time we're most familiar with, the time we use to organize our lives
To make plans, to measure progress.
Right. But Deleuze is suggesting that there's another way of understanding time.
A more elusive and disruptive way.
Which he calls Aion.
Yes.
If Kronos is the time of the present, Aion is the time of the past and the future.
Or more precisely, the time of the pure past and the eternal future. Imagine Aion as this realm of infinite divisibility where the past and the future are not just points on a line, but vast dimensions that shape the present.
It's about the way that the past continues to haunt us.
And the future continues to beckon us.
Even though we can't fully grasp either. So Aion is this sort of spectral time always lurking at the edges of our awareness.
Shaping the present, but never fully present itself.
And Deleuze argues that these two conceptions of time are not mutually exclusive.
No, they're intertwined.
Constantly shaping and reshaping each other.
Right.
It's like Kronos is the surface, the visible aspect of time.
While Aion is the depth, the hidden currents that drive the flow of events.
And Deleuze suggests that it's this interplay between Kronos and Aion that creates the dynamic and unpredictable nature of time.
It's what prevents time from becoming static or predictable.
What keeps the universe in a state of constant flux and becoming up.
That's it.
So even in our everyday experience of time,
Yes.
there's this element of the uncanny, this sense that time is not what it seems.
But there are forces at work that we can't fully grasp.
Right. Now, this is where Deleuze's concept of the virtual comes in.
It's closely linked to his discussion of Aion.
This realm of the pure past and the eternal future.
Yes.
Deleuze argues that the virtual is not some separate mystical realm. No.
It's a real force that operates within the actual, constantly shaping and reshaping the world around us.
Precisely.
So it's not about a separate reality.
No.
It's about the potential that exists within the possibilities that are always lurking beneath the surface of things.
Exactly. And Deleuze argues that this virtual realm is constantly exerting pressure on the actual.
Disrupting the established order, introducing novelty and change.
Wow.
It's like the virtual is this chaotic, unpredictable force that is always trying to break through the surface of the actual.
To create something new, something different.
And Deleuze sees this interplay between the virtual and the actual as central to his understanding of time.
Yes.
He argues that time is not simply a linear progression from past to present to future.
No, it's this complex, multidimensional process where the virtual and the actual are constantly interacting and interpenetrating,
Creating a dynamic and ever-changing reality.
Precisely.
So time is not this neat and tidy container for events.
It's this chaotic and creative force that is constantly shaping and reshaping the world around us.
Right. And Deleuze suggests that this has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It challenges us to see ourselves not as fixed and stable entities, but as beings in a state of constant becoming.
Constantly being shaped and reshaped by the forces of time.
That's right.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of duration, this distinction between Kronos and Aion.
And this concept of the virtual as this disruptive force that is constantly shaping the actual.
Now let's turn to one of Deleuze's most important and challenging concepts, the time image.
The time image is where Deleuze's philosophy of time really takes flight. It's a concept that emerges from his engagement with cinema.
But it has implications that extend far beyond the realm of film theory.
Yes, it's not just about understanding movies.
It's about understanding how time operates in our lives.
How it shapes our perceptions and experiences.
Right.
Deleuze argues that the time image emerges in cinema as a break from the traditional movement image. The movement image, as Deleuze interprets it, captures the continuity of movement.
The sense of the thing itself in motion.
Yes. It's still grounded in a linear flow of time, a sense of causality and progression.
But the time image disrupts that linearity.
Yes, it reveals the virtual, this underlying realm of potentialities that are constantly shaping and reshaping the actual.
So the time image cracks open the surface of the movement image, allowing us to glimpse the forces that are at work beneath the surface of things.
Forces that drive the process of becoming.
Exactly. And Deleuze sees this shift from the movement image to the time image as having profound implications for how we understand reality.
It challenges us to move beyond a linear deterministic view of time and to embrace the fluidity.
The instability, the inherent creativity of time. So the time image is not just a stylistic innovation in cinema, it's a philosophical breakthrough that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about time and reality.
Absolutely.
Now, Deleuze connects this idea of the time image to the concept of the power of the false.
Which is a really intriguing idea.
He's not suggesting that we should embrace falsehood or deception.
No, but that we need to recognize that our perceptions of reality are always partial, always incomplete.
Always shaped by our own biases and limitations.
Exactly. And Deleuze argues that the time image, through its disruptive power, helps us to see this.
To break free from our habitual ways of seeing and understanding.
To open ourselves up to the possibility of the new.
It's like the time image is this philosophical crowbar that pries open our minds.
Allowing us to see the world in a new light.
To glimpse the potential that exists beyond the limitations of our current understanding.
Right. And this brings us to one of the most compelling aspects of Deleuze's philosophy of time.
The connection between the time image and an ethics of becoming.
Yes.
So we're moving from metaphysics to ethics. But it seems like for Deleuze, these two realms are inextricably intertwined.
They are. Deleuze argues that our understanding of time has profound implications for how we live our lives. If we see time as a linear progression towards some predetermined goal, then our ethics will be focused on achieving that goal.
On following the rules.
On conforming to the established order. But if we see time as this process of constant becoming,
this perpetual creation of novelty and difference,
yes,
then our ethics will be very different.
It will be about embracing the uncertainty and ambiguity of life.
About experimenting with different ways of being.
About creating ourselves anew in each moment.
Exactly. And Deleuze argues that the time image, through its disruptive power,
yes,
can help us to develop this ethics of becoming.
It can help us to break free from our habitual ways of seeing and understanding, to challenge the established order.
To create new possibilities for ourselves and for the world around us.
That's right.
It's like a time image is a call to action, an invitation to participate in the perpetual becoming that defines Deleuze's vision of time.
Now let's dive into Deleuze's exploration of the three syntheses of time.
So we're going to move into the heart of Deleuze's analysis of time, into this intricate and challenging territory of the three syntheses.
This is where his engagement with Hume, particularly Hume's ideas about habit and repetition, becomes really important. Deleuze finds in Hume this crucial insight into the nature of time.
And how it shapes our experience.
Yes. Hume argued that our sense of self,
a personal identity.
Right. It isn't based on some fixed, unchanging essence.
But rises from this continuous flow of experiences.
From this repetition of impressions and ideas.
And this repetition for Hume is never exact.
There's always a slight difference of variation that introduces novelty into the flow of experience.
So even in repetition, there's this element of difference that prevents things from becoming static.
Or predictable.
It's like each repetition is a variation on a theme, a new iteration that builds upon, but also deviates from what came before.
Precisely. And Deleuze sees this as key to understanding how the first synthesis of time operates.
The living present.
Yes. He argues that the living present involves this constant process of contraction where we draw together past experiences and future anticipations.
But he emphasizes that this contraction is never a simple reproduction of the past.
No, it's always a creative synthesis that introduces difference and novelty into the present moment.
So the living present isn't just about holding on to the past.
No.
It's about actively transforming it, integrating it into this ongoing flow of experience. It's like each present moment is this unique synthesis of what has been and what might be.
Constantly being reshaped by the forces of repetition and difference.
Right. And this brings us to the concept of habit, which Deleuze sees as fundamental to this first synthesis of time.
He argues that habit is not simply about repeating the same actions over and over again.
It's about this creative process of incorporating past experiences into our present actions.
But in a way that allows for adaptation and transformation.
So habit isn't just mindless repetition.
No.
It's this dynamic process of incorporating past experiences while remaining open to change. It's like we're constantly building on the foundation of our past actions.
But always with the potential to deviate, to create something new, to break free from the constraints of those habitual patterns.
And this is where Deleuze links the concept of habit to the idea of the passive self.
Arguing that we are not always the conscious agents of our actions, he suggests that much of what we do is driven by these habitual patterns that operate below the level of conscious awareness.
These forces that shape our perceptions and actions in ways that we don't fully grasp. It's a rather unsettling thought, isn't it?
It is.
That we're not always in control.
That we're being driven by forces that we don't fully understand.
And this makes Deleuze's concept of signs particularly intriguing. How does that fit into this first synthesis?
Deleuze sees signs as these points of connection between the past and the future within the living present. They are these markers, these traces of past experiences that guide our present actions and shape our expectations of the future.
But he emphasizes that signs are not fixed or absolute.
No. They are open to interpretation, subject to the play of difference and the creative process of contraction that defines the living present.
So signs are not these rigid directives that dictate our behavior.
No.
They're more like suggestions, prompts, openings that we can respond to in a variety of ways. It's like we're constantly reading the signs.
Interpreting them, weaving them into the fabric of our experience.
And this brings us to the idea of learning,
which Deleuze sees as this ongoing process of interacting with signs.
of interpreting and reinterpreting them.
Of incorporating them into our habitual patterns of thought and action.
It's through this interaction with signs that we learn to navigate the complexities of the living present, to adapt to changing circumstances.
And to create something new.
So learning is not simply about acquiring knowledge.
Yeah.
It's about this active engagement with the world, this constant process of interpreting and reinterpreting the signs, of weaving them into the fabric of our experience. And it's this first synthesis with its emphasis on contraction habit and the passive self.
That sets the stage for Deleuze's analysis of the second synthesis.
The pure past.
The second synthesis takes us deeper into the depths of time, into this realm of the pure past.
Which Deleuze describes as the condition for the passing of the present.
Yes, it's this paradoxical concept where the past, while no longer present, somehow continues to exist.
Shaping the present moment in ways that we may not even realize.
Right.
So the past isn't just gone.
Yeah.
It's still here, lurking in the shadows, influencing us in ways that we can't fully grasp. It's like the past is this hidden dimension of time that is always operating beneath the surface of the present.
Exactly. And Deleuze draws on Bergson's concept of duration to explain this. Bergson argued that time is not a series of discrete moments.
But this continuous flow, this indivisible whole.
Yes, Deleuze takes this idea and argues that the pure past is this vast reservoir of duration.
This accumulation of past experiences that continues to exist and influence the present.
Even though it's no longer directly accessible to us.
It's like the pure past is this vast subterranean ocean of time.
And we're like ships sailing on its surface, buffeted by its currents, shaped by its depths, even though we can't see what lies beneath.
And Deleuze uses the metaphor of a cone.
which we discussed earlier.
Right.
To illustrate this, the present moment is the tip of the cone, but it's grounded in this vastness of the pure past, this ever-expanding realm of past experiences.
That continues to shape and reshape the present moment.
Yes.
It's like each present moment is this precarious balancing act perched on the tip of this cone of the past.
Constantly being shaped by the weight and momentum of all that has come before.
And Deleuze also makes this distinction between active and passive memory.
Which seems to be a key part of this second synthesis.
Right.
Deleuze argues that active memory is what we typically think of as remembering.
Consciously recalling specific events or pieces of information.
Yes, but he argues that there's also this more fundamental form of memory, passive memory, which is operating all the time.
Shaping our perceptions, our actions, our very sense of self.
Right.
So passive memory is working behind the scenes, influencing us in ways that we may not even realize.
It's like the pure past is whispering in our ears, guiding our steps, shaping our destinies.
It's a rather unsettling thought, isn't it?
It is.
That we're not entirely in control of our own memories, that the past can reach out and touch us in ways that we can't fully comprehend.
And Deleuze also explores this fascinating paradox of the pure past, this idea that the past is both contemporaneous with the present and pre-existent to it.
That's a bit mind-bending.
It is.
How can the past be both present and pre-existent at the same time?
It's a paradox that reflects the complex and elusive nature of time itself. Deleuze argues that the pure past is contemporaneous with the present because it is constantly shaping and influencing the present moment.
But he also argues that it is pre-existent to the present.
Because it is the condition for the passing of the present.
It's like the pure past is this ground upon which the present moment arises and unfolds this ghostly presence that haunts the present, shaping its contours, defining its possibilities.
Precisely. And Deleuze's analysis of repetition in the second synthesis helps us to understand how this paradoxical relationship between past and present operates.
Yeah.
He distinguishes between two types of repetition in this context. First, there's the repetition of elements.
Or a particular element is repeated over time, like the ticking of a clock or the rhythm of the waves.
Yes, but then he introduces this idea of repetition within the pure past. Which is a repetition of the whole, a repetition of the entire field of past experiences that are contracted into the present moment.
So it's not just about repeating individual elements.
No.
It's about repeating the entirety of the past, this vast and complex web of experiences that continues to shape and reshape the present.
Exactly. And this type of repetition is not about recreating the past in a literal sense. It's
Okay.
about this creative synthesis, this process of drawing together the past in a way that introduces novelty and difference into the present. It's about how the past is constantly being reinterpreted and reconfigured in light of the present.
How the present moment is always a unique and unrepeatable repetition of the pure past.
Precisely.
It's like the pure past is this vast, inexhaustible library, and each present moment is a new interpretation, a new reading, a new way of making sense of those texts.
And this brings us to the crucial role of difference in both the first and second syntheses of time. Deleuze argues that repetition in both cases is not about reproducing the same. It's about introducing difference into the flow of time.
So in the first synthesis,
The repetition of elements is always a repetition with a difference, introducing novelty into the present moment.
and in the second synthesis,
The repetition of the whole is also a repetition with a difference, a creative reconfiguration of the past that introduces novelty into the present.
so difference is this driving force that prevents time from becoming static or predictable.
Yes.
It's what keeps things moving, what allows for creativity and change.
What makes the eternal return not a dreary repetition of the same, but this perpetual creation of the new.
Right. And this focus on difference is central to Deleuze's understanding of how the second synthesis operates. He argues that the pure past is not a homogeneous block of time.
But this heterogeneous multiplicity, this vast and complex field of past experiences that are constantly being reconfigured and reinterpreted in the present moment.
It's like the pure past is this constantly shifting landscape, always being reshaped by the forces of difference and repetition.
Never settling into a fixed or final form.
Precisely. And it's this understanding of the second synthesis that lays the groundwork for Deleuze's exploration of the third synthesis, this pure and empty form of time that disrupts the linear flow of time and reveals the radical openness and potentiality of being in this cat. And this is where Deleuze's engagement with Kant, in particular Kant's concept of the transcendental, becomes really crucial. So we're shifting gears again, bringing in Kant's philosophical framework to help us understand how this third synthesis operates. What aspects of Kant's work is Deleuze drawing on here?
Deleuze is interested in Kant's idea that time is not an empirical concept, something we derive from experience. Kant argued that time is a transcendental condition of experience, a fundamental structure of our consciousness that makes experience possible. Deleuze takes this idea and argues that the third synthesis of time, this pure and empty form of time, is also transcendental. It's not something we can directly experience. It's this underlying condition that makes experience possible. It's like the third synthesis is this hidden structure of time that shapes our experience, but remains elusive beyond our grasp, always operating behind the scenes.
So Deleuze is suggesting that time is not just something that we observe or measure. It's something that is woven into the very fabric of our being, something that shapes our perceptions, our thoughts, our very experience of reality.
Exactly. And Deleuze is pushing Kant's ideas even further, suggesting that the transcendental itself is not fixed or absolute. He argues that the transcendental is subject to the same forces of difference and repetition that operate throughout time. It's not this static, unchanging realm, but this dynamic field that is constantly being reshaped and reconfigured by the forces of becoming.
So even the very structures of our consciousness, the frameworks that shape our understanding of the world, are subject to change to this perpetual becoming that characterizes Deleuze's philosophy of time.
Right. And Deleuze draws on Kant's concept of the schematism to help explain how this third synthesis operates. Kant argued that the schematism is this faculty of our imagination that connects our concepts to our perceptions, bridging the gap between the abstract and the concrete. Deleuze takes this idea and argues that the third synthesis of time operates in a similar way, connecting the pure and empty form of time to our lived experience.
So it's like the third synthesis provides this framework for understanding how the abstract structure of time shapes our concrete experiences, how the transcendental and the empirical are constantly interacting and interpenetrating.
Exactly. And Deleuze also draws on Kant's discussion of I think, this unifying principle of consciousness that accompanies all of our thoughts. Deleuze argues that the third synthesis of time operates in a similar way, unifying our experiences of time, even though time itself is fractured and disjointed. It's like the third synthesis provides this sense of continuity, this illusion of wholeness, even in the midst of rupture and discontinuity, this constant flux and transformation.
But Deleuze also pushes beyond Kant, arguing that this unifying principle is not based on some fixed, unchanging self. He suggests that the self is also subject to the forces of difference and repetition, that it is constantly being reshaped and reconfigured by the flow of time, that it is itself a product of this third synthesis, this pure and empty form of time.
Right. Deleuze is arguing that there is no stable, unchanging self that stands outside the flow of time. The self is caught up in the current, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the forces of becoming, just like everything else.
So even our sense of self is an illusion, a temporary configuration of forces that is constantly being dissolved and reconstituted by the flow of time.
And this brings us to Deleuze's critique of Kant, where he suggests that Kant doesn't go far enough in his analysis of time. Deleuze argues that Kant, while recognizing the transcendental nature of time, still clings to a certain conception of the self as this unifying principle that remains stable throughout time. Deleuze, on the other hand, wants to radicalize this idea, suggesting that the self, like everything else, is subject to the forces of difference and repetition, that it is constantly being shattered and reconstituted by the flow of time.
So for Deleuze, the self is not this stable anchor in the midst of the flux of time. It's another element caught up in the flow, another site of transformation and becoming.
Exactly. And Deleuze also criticizes Kant for clinging to this idea of a pure and empty form of time that remains separate from our lived experience. Deleuze, on the other hand, wants to show how this pure and empty form of time is constantly interacting with our experience, shaping and reshaping our perceptions and actions, disrupting our habitual ways of seeing and understanding, and opening us up to the possibility of the new. It's like Deleuze wants to bridge the gap between the transcendental and the empirical, to show how these seemingly separate realms are actually intertwined, constantly influencing one another.
It's like the third synthesis is this hidden engine that drives the process of becoming this force that is constantly at work beneath the surface of our experience, shaping our perceptions, our actions, our very sense of self.
And this brings us to Deleuze's engagement with Hölderlin, where he explores this idea, the caesura, a break or rupture in time that disrupts the linear flow and opens up new possibilities.
So we're bringing in another voice, another perspective on time to help us understand how this third synthesis operates. How does Holderlin's work inform Deleuze's thinking here? Deleuze is drawn to Holderlin's poetic explorations of time, particularly his idea that time is not this smooth, continuous flow, but this fragmented, disrupted experience. Holderlin uses this term, caesura, to describe these breaks or ruptures in time, these moments where the linear flow is disrupted and something new emerges, these moments where the familiar patterns break down and we're forced to confront the unknown.
And Deleuze sees this concept of the caesura as a key to understanding the third synthesis of time.
Exactly. Deleuze argues that the third synthesis is precisely the caesura, this break in the linear flow of time that opens up new possibilities. It's this moment of disruption where the past and future are no longer neatly ordered, where the present is thrown into a state of flux and uncertainty, where the ground beneath our feet begins to shift and we're forced to find a new way to stand.
So the third synthesis is not just about the past influencing the present. It's about the very structure of time being disrupted, thrown into a state of disarray.
Right. It's about the eruption of the virtual into the actual, the shattering of the illusion of stability and continuity, the opening up of a space for something new, something different, something that could not have been predicted or anticipated.
It's like the third synthesis cracks open the surface of time, revealing the chaotic, unpredictable forces that drive the process of becoming. And it seems like Deleuze's discussion of Hamlet's famous line, "Time is out of joint," is central to his understanding of the third synthesis.
Absolutely. Deleuze sees Hamlet's predicament as a perfect illustration of this third synthesis of time. Hamlet is caught in a moment of profound disruption where the established order has been shattered and the future is uncertain. And Deleuze argues that this experience of time being out of joint is not a personal failing on Hamlet's part. It's a fundamental characteristic of time itself. It's a revelation of the inherent instability and unpredictability of being.
So Hamlet's predicament is not just a personal tragedy, it's a revelation about the nature of time itself. And Deleuze seems to suggest that we all experience this disruption of time, to some extent, that we are all caught up in this process of becoming this perpetual unfolding of difference that is both exhilarating and terrifying.
Right. Deleuze argues that the third synthesis of time is not something that only happens in extreme situations like Hamlet's. It's a fundamental aspect of our experience of time, something that we encounter on a daily basis, even if we're not always aware of it. It's in the unexpected turn of events, in the sudden shift in perspective, in the moments where our comfortable assumptions are challenged and we are forced to reorient ourselves in the world.
So even in the midst of our seemingly ordinary lives, time is constantly being disrupted, reconfigured, thrown out of joint, revealing the fragility of our constructions, the ephemerality of our identities.
Exactly. And it's in these moments of disruption that the potential for change, for the emergence of something new arises. It's in these moments that the virtual breaks through the surface of the actual, shattering the illusion of stability and continuity, and opening up a space for something new to emerge.
It's like the third synthesis is this constant reminder that we are not in control, that the universe is not a machine that we can manipulate and predict, but a living, breathing, ever-changing entity that is constantly unfolding in unpredictable ways.
Now let's delve into how Deleuze sees the third synthesis as a cut, an assembly, an ordering, and a seriation of time.
That's a lot to unpack. It seems like Deleuze is describing this third synthesis as this multifaceted process that reshapes our experience of time, a process that breaks down the old and creates something new, something strange, something unpredictable in its place.
Exactly. It's not a simple singular event, but this complex interplay of forces that disrupts and reconfigures our understanding of time, a process that challenges our linear deterministic view of time and opens us up to the possibility of a more fluid, dynamic, and creative understanding of becoming.
Let's start with the idea of the cut. How does that play into this third synthesis?
Deleuze sees the cut as this fundamental break, this rupture in the linear flow of time that disrupts the neat ordering of past, present, and future. It's like a sudden interruption, a moment of discontinuity that throws us off balance and forces us to reorient ourselves. It's the moment when the film breaks, when the record skips, when the familiar pattern is disrupted, and we're forced to confront the void, the abyss that lies beneath the surface of things.
It's like a chasm opens up in our perception of time, and we have to find a new way to bridge the gap, to make sense of this sudden disruption, this intrusion of the unknown.
Precisely. And this is where the idea of assembly comes in. Deleuze argues that in the wake of the cut, we have to find a new way to assemble the fragments of time to create a new sense of coherence and continuity. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, but the pieces no longer fit in the same way. We have to find a new way to arrange them to create a new image, a new understanding of the whole.
So it's not just about breaking things apart. It's about putting them back together in a new way, creating a new order out of the chaos, a new sense of meaning out of the fragments of the old.
Right, and this process of assembly is not about restoring the previous order. It's about creating something new, something different from what came before. It's about embracing the potential of the cut, the possibility that it opens up for something other, something beyond the limits of our current understanding.
And that brings us to the idea of ordering. How does Deleuze see the third synthesis as a reordering of time?
Deleuze argues that the third synthesis doesn't simply disrupt the previous order of time. It imposes a new order, a new way of understanding the relationship between past, present, and future. It's about creating a new set of connections, a new network of relations, a new way of making sense of the flow of events.
So it's not just about chaos and discontinuity. It's about creating a new structure, a new framework for understanding time, a new map for navigating the labyrinth of becoming.
Exactly. And this new ordering is not fixed or absolute. It's subject to the same forces of difference and repetition that operate throughout time. It's a dynamic order, constantly evolving, constantly being reshaped by the interplay of the virtual and the actual.
It's a precarious order, always on the verge of collapse, always open to the possibility of disruption and transformation. And that brings us to the idea of seriation. How does that fit into Deleuze's understanding of the third synthesis?
Deleuze argues that the third synthesis also involves a process of seriation, of arranging events in a new sequence, creating a new temporal order. It's about challenging the chronology, the linear progression of events, and creating a new set of relations, a new logic of connection that disrupts our habitual ways of understanding the flow of time.
So it's about creating new connections, new relationships between events that disrupt the previous chronology, that challenge our assumptions about cause and effect, that open up new possibilities for understanding the complex and often paradoxical nature of time.
Right. And this process of seriation is not about establishing a fixed or definitive order. It's about creating a new perspective on time, a new way of understanding the flow of events, a new way of seeing the relationships between things.
It's like the third synthesis gives us a new lens through which to view time, a lens that reveals the fluidity and instability that are inherent to the process of becoming a lens that challenges our linear deterministic view of the world and opens us up to the possibility of a more dynamic and unpredictable reality. Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Deleuze's concept of time, from duration and the virtual to the time image and the three syntheses. We've grappled with his complex and often paradoxical ideas and hopefully emerged with a new appreciation for the strange and wonderful world of Deleuzian time.
It's a challenging but ultimately rewarding journey, one that invites us to rethink our assumptions about time and to embrace the creative possibilities of becoming.
Absolutely. And as always, we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas on your own, to delve deeper into the texts to see where Deleuze's thought takes you.
Because, as Deleuze himself might say, the process of becoming is never finished.
It's a journey without a destination, a perpetual exploration of the unknown.